you do, you do. To the you do. Do you do, you do. Okay, we are live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Zoom. And we're going to be live on the other Facebook pages in just a moment. And then we will get moving. Now it's worth having you in the neighborhood. We already feel the impact.
Oh, you just moved or something?
Yeah, this week. He didn't. He's still moving.
I'm still there, but I'm here.
Do you do? Do you do?
Thanks so much.
Please mute yourselves, ladies. Whoever comes into class, please mute yourselves. Greatly appreciated. Otherwise, I'm going to find out your recipes in the middle of class without not even wanting them. I just came back from an hour bike ride. I'm still schwitzing. That's why I didn't even put on my rabbi clothes, my costume. I'm still wearing my biking clothes. Many schlepped me to the library, then to the tea house, then back home. I'm going to live an extra day. But it was a good bike ride today. Just one more share, and then we will be good to go.
We just got a massive rainstorm here and lightning.
We sent it to you. It was here earlier today. We sent it your way. After your 112 degrees on Sunday, you deserved some rain, so we were kind enough to share some with you.
Do you have a yarmulke on?
Do I have a yarmulke?
Yeah, okay, all right. I got to make sure. I mean, I don't
like asking me if I'm still circumcised.
Well, we can compare.
So the answer to both is yes, I have a yarmulke, and yes, I'm still circumcised, and now we're going to start learning Torah. So
those are different.
I missed what you said, Randy, but it probably was good. So say it again.
I said those are very different.
Thanks for that observation. Okay, well now at least you know now what my feelings are about not wearing a yarmulke. You can't even accuse me of not being clear enough. Okay, we are in Chumash Dvarim. We're starting a new sefer. Last week we had Shabbos Chazak. We finished the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, and this week, first of all, this Shabbos is Shabbos Chazayin, which is a very special haftorah that we read about the vision of the prophet. But it also, the Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev taught a very famous teaching that on this Shabbos, the soul of every Jew gets a vision of the third holy temple. Because as we mourn the destruction of the first two temples, our souls get a little insight into the third temple. So it's a great opportune time to sort of cash in on the Mashiach energy, the Messianic energy of what we've been waiting for. Actually, I saw a rabbi, is a senior Rabbi Shimon Hecht in Park Slope, and he said, I don't think he was quoting from the Rebbe, I think he was observing that the Rebbe took, most people spend the 9 days before Tisha B'Av, today's Rosh Chodesh. So today we said Hallel, we celebrate Rosh Chodesh, but it's also the time we begin the mourning process. We don't drink wine, we don't eat meat or chicken until after Tisha B'Av, except for Shabbos, because Shabbos we don't mourn. So like tonight, you're scrambling. I had leftover stir fry from last night. Then I remember this morning that I can't eat it today. Yesterday I ate it before the sun set. Today it's already the 9 days. So we had fish and more fish. It's the 9 days of the year that Jews are pumped with mercury for the whole year. But the Rebbe took the 9 days, which was always about mourning the destruction of both temples, and the Rebbe made it about a time that we focus on the building of the third temple. So it's a very opportune time. Yes, it's a time of mourning, but it's also a time of regeneration and growth that comes from the darkness. And so we're in this unique 9 days, and we're also beginning Chumash Dvarim, the book of Deuteronomy, and there is always a connection, a correlation between whatever we're doing on the calendar, wherever we find ourselves on the calendar, on the days of the month and the day of the week with the particular parsha. So first we're going to delve into the parsha, and then we're going to see how it correlates with the fact that we're in the 9 days prior to Tisha B'Av. And for those that don't know, Tisha B'Av is a 25-hour fast day that begins Wednesday night of Wednesday night of next week, all the way through Thursday night. And it's no eating, it's no drinking, there's no stories. I'm going to be dehydrated. Yeah, don't worry. We all know. We all get dehydrated. It's called hydrating a lot before the fast. Get your caffeine. Get whatever you need, the hydration and caffeine, which sort of, knock each other off, but sure. And then fast. So unless you're pregnant and giving birth within 3 days, unless you're a birthing person that's going to give birth within 3 days, don't give me your stories. Consult your rabbi and you'll find out if you have some kind of leniency on Tisha B'Av. Now that I got that out of the way, let's tackle the parsha. So the book of Deuteronomy is the 5th book. It's called the 5 books of Moses, but really the first 4 books are the primary Torah. Deuteronomy is Moshe's repetition. In the final 36 days of Moshe's life, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat till the 7th of Adar when he passed away, Moshe goes on to teach the Torah in 70 languages so that all the 70 primary languages of the world has a Torah available to it. It imbues humanity, imbues the world, imbues people with the ability to understand Torah. So no nudnik should show up and say, well, I don't speak Hebrew, so the Torah is not for me. Baloney. The Torah was made available to everyone in every language possible. So Moshe does that. He reminds the Jews of many of their flaws and their mistakes. And he also gives them a lot of encouragement for the future, going into Israel as they're going to be led by Joshua. He forewarns them about idolatry and about falling for the nations around there and for not listening to Joshua and not trusting in God. The 10 Commandments are reiterated next week's parsha, not this week, but next week in Ves Chanan. The Shema is in Deuteronomy. There's so many fundamental things because it was Moshe's last will and testament. This is it. At 120, he's going to pass away. And he wants to make sure the Jews, whatever they're going to do, at least they'll hear it from the horse's mouth, so to say, from the Moses himself, what's expected of them, and what they end up doing is what they end up doing. We always struggle. I think parents struggle with this too. Is it worth telling your kids what your values are? Not forcing them, but telling them, because they're not going to listen anyhow. That's not your job. I stood this week, I spent 25 minutes talking to a father whose own 56-year-old son shot himself in the head and committed suicide just 10 days ago. I sat and spoke to this non-Jewish neighbor of mine. I brought him a book about mourning. I brought him flowers and sat and stood face to face with a father who has one child. He has grandchildren, one child who ended his life because he was struggling. And so when we talk about, parental relationships, when we talk about how we show up in our children's lives, it's not always, it's almost never about you guaranteeing the outcomes. It's about you needing to say the truth in the nicest, most sensitive way, and hopefully some of it will be heard by them. Moshe Rabbeinu stands by the Jewish people in the plains of Moab, and we'll talk about that on the Trans-Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, and he's giving them his last will and testament, and he's doing it with heart and soul. He was thoughtful. Even when he reminded them of their sins, he did it with sort of hinting to it instead of just saying it deliberately, because he was very sensitive to them, but he also wanted them to hear the truths of what will happen if they don't behave and how blessed they will be in so many ways if they do behave. Behaving in the land of Israel, behaving as a Jew is not about not getting in trouble. It's about bringing the greatest blessings into your life. Is it hard? Absolutely. That famous, I don't like saying it. It's not famous. It's famous. If you grow up in Chabad and Crown Heights, it's famous. It's not really famous. Elvis is famous. The story I'm about to tell you is not so famous. But a person once complained to the Rebbe that he's having a certain job is hard and I can't do it, and the mission, and the Rebbe said, since when do you have a contract with God that says it's supposed to be easy? Where does it say that? Where in our faith does it say that anything about your relationship with God is supposed to be easy? Blessed, yes. Meaningful, yes. Fulfilling, yes. Productive, yes. Holy, yes. Good and kind and gracious, yes. Easy? not in our vocabulary. You know where it was easy? Free? In Egypt. Freeloaders. Being Jewish is never about easy. It's about living for a higher purpose on a higher plane. So Moshe is conveying this to the Jewish people, and we come to a verse right in the beginning. Let me just pull it up here. Right on the first page, 1058, 1059. Moshe says, not Moshe, the Torah says, these are the words of subtle rebuke, which Moses spoke to all the Jewish people. And then in parentheses, it says, in the plains of Moab on east, bank of the Jordan. But in the actual Hebrew, it doesn't say plains of Moab. It says bank of the Jordan River. In Hebrew, Be'ever HaYarden, Trans-Jordan, on the bank of the river, on the bank of the Jordan. Now, if you study Rashi, you know that the bank of the Jordan is also the place that we know of because we already mentioned it in the book of Numbers. It's a location called Arvois Moav, either the plains of Moab or the land of Moab, but mostly the plains of Moab. Is it the same place? Is the bank of the river, the bank of the Jordan, and the plains of Moab the same place? And if it is, why not say the same location? Someone is trying to be a trickster. You say, you want to meet me in Bozeman? You want to meet me in Gallatin County? And if they're both the same, why not just say the same? Why change the location? Now, when you talk about this particular term, which is Be'ever HaYarden, the Trans-Jordan, the bank of the Jordan River, the bank of the Jordan River is an expansive area. Right? It's not, not in America's terms of big, but for the Middle East, the bank of the Jordan River, especially on Israel's terms, the bank of the Jordan River is a big area. And it actually is a name, it's a geographical name that gives you an idea of a general area, the area that's east of the Jordan. Why not use right here? Why didn't Moses in the beginning of Deuteronomy and Devarim, when it's telling us where he spoke to the Jewish people, why not use the term that makes more sense, which is more accurate, which is Arvos Moab, the plain of Moab, which is how he's referred to at the end of the book of Numbers, that location that says, these are the commandments and the laws which Moshe commanded in the plains of Moab near Jericho by the Jordan. Al Yarden Yerecha, near the, why not say the same term? Why over here in Deuteronomy, one parsha later, we're referring to the location as the bank of the river instead of the plains of Moab. So what I share with you tonight is from a beautiful, heartfelt Farbrengen of the Rebbe from the summer of 1988. So not all things considered, not that long ago. And I say heartfelt because in the end of the Farbrengen, which so much of it is hard to repeat in tonight's class, it's not the actual understanding of the topic, it's more of the Rebbe's. In those years when the Rebbe would talk about Mashiach, you can tell the way he spoke about it, that it was with so much, on the one hand, there was so much pain. Like, why is Mashiach not here yet? Haven't we been through enough? And he actually, in that Farbrengen, the Rebbe says that. But also with this incredible yearning. This incredible yearning, waiting for this moment to actually transpire. So in that Farbrengen in 1988, the Rebbe first gives the simple explanation of why in the end of Numbers it's referred to as the plains of Moab. In the beginning of Devarim of Deuteronomy, it's referred to as the bank of the Jordan. And then he goes into a deeper understanding. I'm going to do both. We'll start with the practical. The book of Numbers, the Rebbe says, primarily is talking about the journeys, the 42 journeys where the Jewish people camped and encamped in the desert. So if you're going to tell us where they encamped, where they set up shop, where they opened their tents, where they had the clouds of glory, then it makes most sense, especially because there was a lot of different locations in the desert to give us to pinpoint the exact location. Because if you just say the desert, well, they had a lot of different places they stopped in the desert, they encamped in the desert. So you have to be more accurate when you're actually talking about their travels. But in the book of Deuteronomy, which is Moshe right before the Jews go into the land of Israel, he's not talking about where they're traveling currently, because the only place they're going to travel currently is across the Jordan to go into Israel. He's just getting them prepped to go into the land of Israel. which, by the way, if you study the Nachmanides and the Sforno, it's clear that this entire talk is about Moshe prepping the Jewish people to go into the land of Israel. Therefore, from that perspective, we don't need to have the exact location of where this is being said, because it's not about the exact location. It's the fact that Moshe is prepping them to go into the land of Israel. And so the general location, which is the bank of the Jordan, is good enough. So that's the simple, proper explanation for why the same location can be referred to in two different ways. But if you know the Rebbe, you know the Rebbe wasn't going to suffice with that. There has to be a deeper mystical reason, an idea from Chassidus of why in Numbers, when it's talking about the journeys through the desert, it refers to it as the plains of Moab. And when they're finally about to go into Israel, where Moshe is guiding them in their entry to Israel, suddenly we're referring to it as Transjordan or the bank of the river.
Is the bank of the river right there where
I just said the bank of the river is the entire area.
so maybe the camp was there, and then when he gave his speech, he was on the bank of the river.
I just said the bank of the river is the entire area. Anywhere that was on the bank of the Jordan River is referred to as the bank of the Jordan. It's anywhere east of the Jordan River.
Yeah, that's. And where is that in relationship to the Moab desert? Moab.
What we didn't say, we said the plains of Moab.
Yeah.
What does it matter? He doesn't refer to it as the plains of Moab. In Deuteronomy, he refers to it.
I'm thinking that maybe the plains of Moab is where the encampment was, and somewhere in the bank of the Jordan is where Moses was talking from.
You want to assume that Moshe wasn't with the people?
Well, they were right there.
No, they were encamped. When the encampments meant they were surrounded by the clouds of glory. They had the pillar of fire at night. They had the protection from the snakes and scorpions. Wherever they were, everyone was together, surrounded by the same clouds. So the fact that in Numbers and Bamidbar it's referred to as the plains of Moab, which is the particular location within Transjordan that they were located at, versus in Deuteronomy that we're reading, it refers to it in this general term, in the general location. Why change the name unless there's a, so the practical reason as we said, but what's the mystical reason? And what the Rebbe says in that mystical reason is mind-blowing. Chassidus explains that why, let's ask ourselves a more foundational question. Why did the Jews need 42 stops in the desert? Why 42, not 197? Why not 33? Why 42? Why schlep through the desert altogether? You say, well, they were punished because of the spies. No, they were punished because of the spies not to go into Israel. Why couldn't they just stay wherever they were right there, Kadesh Barnea, wherever it was, park yourself, and when we're ready to go into Israel, we'll go into Israel. Why? 42 times we have to make Stiebel hoppers. We have to go from Stiebel to what? To the Jews for what? So Chassidus explains that everything in life has a purpose, and if God put us for 42 locations in the desert, in a place that the Torah refers to as a place that has no water, it's a place of snakes and scorpions. A desert represents a spiritual desert. A place that's filled snakes and scorpions are not just the physical animals that can hurt you. It represents the Kelipah. It represents the powers, the energies of impurity, the energies of evil, the creations that God created to give us free choice. They prosper in the desert. So God took us for 42 journeys throughout the desert, so at each location we found ourselves in, when we did the mitzvahs, when we studied Torah. Remember, this is all after Sinai. So when we studied Torah, when we did mitzvahs, when we lived the way Jews are meant to live in the desert, we're uplifting those places, and we are conquering, or at least subduing, the Kelipah forces, the forces of evil and impurity that exist in those places in the desert. And that's the reason Hashem wanted us to move around in the desert, because at each location we went to, we were able to transform those locations to more holy places. And by the way, that as a commercial message, that idea still stands tonight. Today, when you travel somewhere, I had that when we went in March with spring break. We drove to Eureka, and I've been to Eureka many times, but I never drove from Eureka to Libby, past the Libby Dam, into Troy, all the way up to the Yak, knowing that I'm in a place where I don't know that a Jew has ever been. You say a pasuk from Torah, you say some psalms, you say some Tehillim, you say so, put on tefillin, daven mincha. Say some Tanya, you say holy words. You don't know if there was ever a Jew there before, and if there was, if they were doing anything holy to uplift that part of creation. It's an incredibly empowering feeling to know that you can be in a place that perhaps no Jew was ever there and never did anything to refine the place. So when the Jews were in the desert, that's what they were doing. wasn't random. There's nothing random. It wasn't 42 because God decided 42 because he made a raffle and decided let's go with number 42. It was explicit. It was exact. It was intentional. What was the hardest klipa that they encountered in the desert? It was the last location. Arvos Moab, the plains of Moab. Moab comes from the word Me'av. If you remember in the book of Genesis, Lot's daughters had an inappropriate relationship with him after the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, with their own father. Incest in all its glory. Now, you could say they did it for the proper intentions, which is an interesting thing in itself. I actually learned today, was it today? This morning. This morning I learned the Gemara Sanhedrin, very early this morning, that there was the famous time when the sages decided they're going to get rid of idolatry from the world. That's why we don't have temptation for idolatry anymore. And it worked. People used to defecate in Baal Peor. They did crazy things in idols that we read it and we think they're out of their minds. So the sages realized that it works. That you can get rid of it. They said, let's get rid of sexual temptation. And they did. And over the next week, they realized, next 3 days, they realized no chickens were laying eggs. Right? There was no sexual temptation in the world. So suddenly there's no procreation. There's nothing being produced in the world. So they said, let's go back to sexual temptation because it's a good thing. It has to be balanced. But they did it in a way where incest would be something still looked at as disgusting, which is a good thing. But Lot and his daughters did this most disgusting thing, which they committed incest. Not only did they commit incest, but Lot and his first daughter, she named the child Moab, which means Me'av. That I gave birth to this child, Me'av, from my daddy. She publicized it. She was proud of it. The second one named the kid Ammon, which comes from the word Ami, my nation, but she wasn't so public about it. She was more modest. The first kid? So the klipa, the negative energy of Moab, is very, very powerful. What it actually represents in the world of Kabbalah, in the world of mysticism, right? Me'av means from the Father. What is the attribute of Father in the 10th Sfirot? What is the Father of all attributes? No, Chachma. The first initial intellectual lightning bolt of an idea. So it's when your intellect becomes, perverted. The Kelipah of Chachma is Moab, and if you're in the plains of Moab, what's the Hebrew word for plains? Arvot Moab. Arvot comes from the word Erev, evening, darkness. It was the darkest of all dark Klipot. It was the darkest of all dark divine energy that's impure. The energies that need to be transformed. So the last location they were at in Numbers, excuse me, when they were still in Numbers, which means we're still talking about their journeys. So it's still about elevating the locations that they were at. So the Torah refers to it in its particular name, Arvos Moab, the plains of Moab, which means the darkness of the Klipa called Moab, the darkness of the lowest type of Klipa, which means the hardest Klipa to transform. So when you're dealing with the transformation, you have to call the spade what it is. You have to know what Klipa you're dealing with. But in the book of Deuteronomy that we start reading this week, we're not talking about the journeys themselves. That was done already at this point. We're just talking about Moshe encouraging the Jews when they go into Israel. It's not about the past. The past has been dealt with already. And by the way, even though later in Deuteronomy it does mention Arvos Moab one more time, it mentions it in connection to where Moshe passed away. Because that was indeed a very dark moment for the Jewish people. So we go back one time to using that term. But generally going forward from here, the term for that location is Eretz Moab, the land of Moab. Not Arvos Moab, not the darkness of Moab, just the land of Moab. But here we're just about Moshe talking to the Jewish people and encouraging them as they go into the land of Israel. It's referred to simply as Ever HaYarden, the bank of the river. A more general term, because the details of the transformation of the particular location are not important at that point, because it's not about that. And so, in that same Farbrengen, the Rebbe makes the connection between that and our current state of affairs. Right? There's a time when the Jews are dealing with the dark of the dark. But the Rebbe says we've been through that. We've been through that. What does that mean? It means we've been through, the Rebbe says, yeah, we've been through the Holocaust, but the Rebbe says more. Just like then, the Jews were done with all the negative. They finished with Amalek and the Midianites and all the Egyptians and everything they had to deal with. The Rebbe says that in this exile that we're in, we've been through all the tests. We've been through all the challenges and the suffering. The Rebbe says even the Gentiles experienced, and I don't know what he's referring to. I mean, maybe he's referring to the Armenian genocide. This was before Sudan. I don't know what he's referring to, but that not just Jews, humanity has suffered enough. So we now switched from being in the plains of Moab. Now we are with the Moses, so to say, at the brink of the Jordan. And the only thing we see in front of us is how are we going to tackle the land of Israel? How are we going to get into the new reality that we need to face, which is a messianic era? So it doesn't mean we quit our jobs and stop making the world a better place. It just means we're now focused on doing so with the intent of moving us into this new reality, this new Mashiach reality, which is when we go into the land of Israel, just like Moshe did with the Jews. When they were done those 42 journeys, it's now more of a focus on the future, not on the past. And for generations, for decades, for 70, 80 years at least, so much of Jewish education has been about the past. Torture Jewish kids with Holocaust education. Sadly, we managed to educate all the Jews about the Holocaust. You know who we didn't educate? The rest of the world. The Inquisition. Many today at dinner, I said I really want Argentina to win on Sunday against Spain. He said, why? I said, because the Spanish did the Inquisition. And many people started laughing. What was his response? He says, yeah, and Argentina let all the Nazis in after the war. I was like, you go, kid, man. I was so proud. I don't care who won. It's like, that's a good response. Put you on the debate stage. I still want Argentina to win, but that's a separate issue. I like how Argentina treats the Jews these days. So I'm a very superficial reasoning. It's not about the players. It's simply about they have a president in a country that supports Israel. I'm like, go Argentina, whatever. But humanity has suffered a lot, and we are moving into a reality where the focus needs to be on the future. And I think that goes right into the point that I made at the beginning of the class, which is that you could spend the next 9 days focused specifically on the past. And we do. We're going to read the book of Lamentations on next Wednesday night. We're going to say various prayers, love a minyan from Mincha. We're going to have all the stuff that we are meant to do. No question about it. But at the same time, the Talmud says that on the day of the destruction is when Mashiach's soul was born. The day that the temple was destroyed, almost 2,000 years ago, was the day that God gave birth to the soul of Mashiach.
The first temple.
Second temple. God gave birth to the soul of Mashiach, which means you can look at the destruction. Right? There's two ways to look at destruction. You look at destruction, you say, wow, how sad. Or you can look at the destruction and say, it only gets better from here.
Like the fox.
Every time I've ever had a construction, I hate construction. Well, I love construction as long as it's not on my property. I don't like living with construction. I don't like how long it takes to do construction. I have very little patience with construction. But when we did the last addition to the house, back when the shul was still in the house, it was 2017, they were digging the ground. They busted up my whole yard. What was I thinking the whole time? Yeah, but we're going to build something amazing. Is it going to be messy? You bet. Construction is always messy. Nah. Is it going to take time and money and more money and time than you ever dreamt of? Yes. But in halachic terms, it's called Seisur Amanas Livnos. You're destroying with the intent of rebuilding. It's a very, very different type of destruction. Hashem destroyed our temple because he needed to knock us into shape. But the goal was never destruction. The goal was that we should get back into shape and eventually he could build a third temple. We're not there yet. But you can look at the destruction and say, oh, woe is to us, woe is to us. Or he knocked us down to bring us back up, and he will bring us back up. And like I say all the time, and I will say it till I'm blue in the face, but Rabbi, do you really think Mashiach is going to come in this reality? All I'll say to that is, if you would have asked a Jew in Egypt, with the women being raped and the children being used as cement in the walls, and the men being abused with slave tasks, the taskmasters, You think redemption will ever happen? They would have all said no. But when it was meant to happen, kaboom. This Shabbos, one of our guests that was visiting from out of state, who, if you would have looked around the room, looked very super duper religious, came to me after Shabbos, after Havdalah, and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure. Do you really believe Mashiach's coming?" I said, "Yeah. I would never do what I do. I would never live the life I live in Montana, certainly not, if I didn't. Because you really think you'll see it in your lifetime?" I'm like, absolutely. And he was totally shocked. Not because he's a bad Jew. He struggles, obviously, with this belief, and I think many people do. But it's our job. I don't mean ours as in a Chabad rabbi. It's all of our job that when we study Torah and we look at history and we look at what our people have been through and where we're going, to say to yourself, hold on, is it really that unrealistic to believe in Mashiach's coming? If I would have told you 5 years ago that there's going to be a plague and 3 or 4 or 5 people are going to shut down the entire universe, would you believe me? You'd say, Chaim, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy guy. I didn't think it would ever be possible, and yet it was. So why, when it comes to negative things, are we perfectly fine recognizing that things can happen overnight to change our lives? When it comes to good things, we can't. And so therefore, it's an excuse. It's easier to be negative. It's easier to focus on the destruction than it is to focus on the rebuilding. It's easier to focus on our horror show of the Jewish people, which is a very legit horror show. But if Jews spent as much time fighting anti-Semitism as they would studying about the coming of Mashiach and what the temple is going to look like and what the offerings are going to look like and what humanity is going to look like and how peaceful it's going to be, they would be more peaceful people. So when they walk around, they wouldn't walk around with a chip on their shoulders the whole day. You know, I was at the library, literally, I biked to the library with many, but I didn't go in. We don't have chains yet for our bike. And considering that Bozeman is becoming a metropolitan area, I'm not comfortable leaving my new bike outside so that someone should ride off and I should have to sit and fight with them at the HRDC to get my bike back. So I waited with the bikes outside. A lady was schlepping along. She looked maybe, I don't know, let me guess, I'll be kind, off the 65. She was schlepping with a bag and she's walking slowly. Then she comes all the way back and she looked lost. I said, "You looking for the entrance?" She said, "No. I just wanted you to know that I know I was looking at you. I didn't want you to think I was looking at you negatively because of your tzitzis." Now, she said tzitzis like a Jew. So I said, and first of all, I said, I thought you were looking at, I was trying to fix the handlebar on my bike. I thought that's what she was looking at. I said, it's Bozeman. I'm not, people look at me all the time and I know there's no no one's looking at me with a negative. What's your story? She doesn't live here. She's just visiting. She went to Lubavitch. She tells me, I went to Lubavitch. I'm standing in front of the library. I went to Lubavitch. Where? Boston. So I said, "Oh, you went to Achetz Mimon. Rabbi Cement must have been your principal." He says, "Rabbi Cement was my principal." I don't know Rabbi Cement, but I know his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So here's a woman in Bozeman, Montana, who's just visiting for a few days. And she sees tzitzis. She feels it's important to come all the way back to tell me that she wasn't giving me a dirty look. She was just a little like, oh, tzitzis in Bozeman. If we could focus on the beauty of that. Hey, man, come on in. We're almost done. We can focus on the beauty of that, on the beauty that we see every day wherever we go. The amount of times they get stopped right here in the corner at Town and Country, the people who are visiting town, and they're like, "Hey, are you the rabbi here? Are you Chabad?" In the summer, it happens every day. In the winter, it happens once a week. Always positive, always uplifting, and even from the Gentiles. "Are you a rabbi? Are you Jewish?" And you answer yes with stolz, and the conversation is always incredible. So we need to learn to move our brains, and it's not easy because the media and the world we live in does not want you to live there because it's not good for business if you're in a good place. But we need to learn to see the world with the Mashiach lenses. So let's put ourselves in Eva HaYarden on the bank of the river Jordan instead of putting ourselves in the plains of Moab. We moved on from the plains of Moab. No need to be there anymore. Say goodbye to the plains of Moab. We've dealt with you. We're done with you, and now we're moving in psychologically, internally, and then collectively into a Mashiach state. So that Mirz Hashem, God willing, Mashiach will come today, which means tonight we'll first of all, finish my stir fry. Second of all, we can make a big barbecue with Mashiach coming tonight. We won't have to fast on Tisha B'Av. It'll be the era we've been waiting for. The Geula Hamitis V'Ashleima, the complete and true redemption, the coming of Mashiach came speedily in our days. Amen. Tomorrow night, next week, class is Wednesday night. That's the fast. I don't remember what time the fast starts. I'm assuming it's around 9:00. So I'll decide next week if I'm cranky or not. If we do class, prep, and it's not a colonoscopy, it's just a fast. So the prep, just means that have to come to class. We'll give everyone Gatorade at class. Anyhow, I'll let you know next week. Sei gesund. We'll see you back soon.